There is an issue I need to bring to your attention. In fact, I'm coming up with this video because of something that happened on my site recently, and that's why I feel it is important to address this issue. And that has to do with the people we call engineers, engineer in quotes, who supervises our building project. I'm sure now somebody will be asking me, is it this my small bungalow or this my small one decking or this my two-story building that I'm going to engage architects, engineer, and everybody to go? Can't I engage just one simple person to do the construction for me? I agree with you that it is important that you don't, for issues of saving money, you may not get into involving a lot of persons. But you also need to be careful as to who you engage and who you call engineer on that building project. Now, let me tell you why I'm making this case. On my site recently, somebody who calls himself engineer, who we later found out is an experienced mason, somebody who has been a foreman, he's been a mason for a very long time, who accepted the job of constructing a retaining wall next to my own retaining wall on a site because of the topography of the place, only went below to dig under as he was digging ground, making excavations for his own retaining wall, went and dug under the foundation of my own retaining wall that almost got that wall down crashing. Now, the issue was serious, and I had to involve Development Control and the Federal Housing Authority that co-owned that estate. Now, when they sent their engineers to come to check, the first question they asked was the same question I asked when I got to that site. Did you investigate where the foundation of this retaining wall is by the time you came to site before you started your own investigation? And the guy said that he just managed, that he just took a measurement and just started excavating. I mean, that was reckless and it was unprofessional. It was negligent enough for anybody to do that. Well, only for us to find out that that guy is a mason who has been around for a long time, and he took a job of an engineer to do a very sensitive engineering work without the background, without understanding. Now, this brings me to an explanation. Sometimes somebody can know how something is done, but you may not understand the reason behind doing that thing the way it is. Some of these people who answer engineers, now masons answer engineers, carpenters answer engineers. The funny one was that I took the number of a laborer only for me to dial the number. Truecaller told me engineer, so and so. And I'm like, are you serious? A laborer is also answering engineer now because he's been around building construction for a while. Now, these people do not understand the difference between that something is done in a particular way and why that thing is done in that way. And that is the problem between these people and the real people who are qualified to do the job. You could know that something is, or see that something is being done in a way, but you may not understand why. Because that same thing done in that way may not work that way in another circumstance. And that means that another approach could be used in another way. But because you've been around for some time and that is the only way it's been done, makes you feel that that's the only way it is done. That is the difference between these tradesmen who claim to be engineers and those who are really qualified to answer engineers on your building project. So let me now come down to explain to you the persons who fit into this picture or this title of engineer on your building project. Let me start with those who go to some technical schools. Some persons attended technical schools where they are trained in different trades in building construction. They are trained from the basic trades to the very serious trades in construction of buildings. These persons almost become builders at the end of the day. These persons are qualified to supervise some simple buildings, but with the support of engineers and architects who did the designs of those buildings. Because by virtue of their trainings, they understand the basics of these trainings. They are able to fit into supervising some basic kind of buildings, that they can do. Now, professionally, let me list out the persons who are qualified to handle projects or supervise your construction project or who fit into this title of engineers, apart from these basic tradesmen who went to technical schools and who have learned these trades and who can supervise these works as they're going on. We have the person who is a builder, who studied building technology in school. A builder is trained in building technology, he is trained in structural engineering and all aspects of buildings. In fact, he learns how to handle, install, and deal with all elements of a building as a builder. This man fits in squarely into the position of answering engineer on that your project. So you can engage a builder. He is qualified also to supervise your building project. The next other person is the architect. He fits into that position of engineer, in quote, to supervise your building project. Why? By the way, he's the person who initiates the design in question is his own, is the brainchild behind the design. So he sits very qualified to supervise the design that he has implemented, that he has designed. He is qualified to see the implementation of the design which he has done. So an architect fits squarely to be able to, supervise your building project. The next person is a structural engineer. A structural engineer, his core is to design the skeleton, the structural part of your building after the architect has done his design. By virtue of his training, he did architecture in school, he did structures in school, as well as other aspects of engineering that has to do with buildings and structures. So he is qualified to fit into that position of answering engineer on your project. The next other person who fits in is a quantity surveyor. A quantity surveyor's core is to cost a building. Now, to be able to cost a building, he needs to understand various parts of the building, interpret every design of the building, and he's able to tell how the building is constructed and how the elements in the building interact. So in school, he did structural engineering courses, he did architectural courses in school, as well as other aspects of engineering, like mechanical, electrical kind design engineering, to be able to cost these aspects of a building. So he sits also in a good position to be able to answer engineer on a project, especially when he has improved in his building technology skills. Another person who fits in is the electrical engineer. The electrical engineer, his core is to design the electrical aspect of the building. But before he can do that, he needs to have taken courses in architecture, courses in structural engineering, to be able to understand how building parts interact and how these elements fit in, to be able to design and supervise the electrical part of the building. So he too has the capacity to supervise the construction of the building, especially if he has developed himself in construction technology. And the last person is the mechanical engineer. He too, his core has to do with the mechanicals of the building, the plumbing, the air conditioning, the hot and cold water aspect of the building. These are his core. But to be able to do that design and supervise it, he needs to also understand how the building elements interact with each other. So he would have taken he takes a course in architecture, a course in structural engineering to be able to understand how buildings are. So with this background that he has, he too can stand in to fit into this engineer title to supervise a building project, especially too if he has developed himself in construction technology. So you can see these are the persons by virtue of training that are qualified to fit into that space of engineer. Don't go and engage a mason. Don't go and engage a carpenter or an iron bender or somebody who doesn't have a business in construction because he has been around building construction for some time. And so now he is qualified to answer engineer to supervise your project. You may run into problem and the cost of such a problem will even be more than it will cost you to engage a proper person to supervise your building project. So the next time you want to engage somebody as an engineer, in quote, to supervise your building, please be sure that you are engaging the correct person. I'll be here next time to discuss something more in the construction industry.